Afternoon everyone, you've joined me today on a beautiful January day over by Duntulm on the Isle of Skye. We're going to be checking out a few different locations, Duntulm Castle and Duntulm Rock, and hopefully we're going to get some seascapes shooting out towards the Outer Hebrides, because right now there are some big beautiful waves, big rolling waves, arching waves, and hopefully that'll create a beautiful foreground. Right, time to get on with it, see what we can create. So unfortunately, Duntulm Castle is not classed as being structurally sound, so we're not really meant to go in there, so I'm not going to. But what I am going to do is I'm going to have a little walk down and have a little look at Duntulm Rock. I've got about an hour and a half until sunset actually starts, so I've got plenty of time to sort of have a little look around and see what is possible. And I know the location down by the bottom of Duntulm is amazing. I know I've got a composition in mind. It's the famous one, but if the light works out, and it could tonight, it will be amazing and it'll be beautiful. The sea has got enough veracity in it to give it that something a little bit special, something that little bit interesting. But I've never actually been down to have a look at Duntulm Rock, so that's what I'm going to do now. So I've had a little look. Not a proper thorough look, but this is Duntulm Rock, the rock that stands right in the middle of this bay. And I think in favourable conditions, with a side lit chunk of rock, it would look quite spectacular. And maybe with some beautiful clouds in the sky and stuff like that, or maybe some really dramatic clouds in the sky. But in its current state, where it's very dull, flat, and if anything, it's taken away from the beautiful mountains over on the Isle of Harris that you can see in the background, I don't think it's going to work today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to head back over the other side of Duntulm Castle onto the rocks down there, because I've seen some really epic waves hitting the side, hitting the black rocks. But this little bay, I'm not sure if it's doing it. So I'm going to head up a little bit higher, over the top, over to Duntulm Rocks, see what I can make. Look at that, absolutely beautiful. And I've never actually seen it with the tide so low, where you can see so many rocks at the bottom, and that's going to create some great drama in the foreground to try and make this castle that is photographed so many times that little bit different. So I think I found where I'm going to take my first image from, and it might work, it might not, I'm not too sure. The light isn't great, so if there's no light, as I always say, find that texture, and that is why I've come so close. There is one issue though, and something that I'm going to have to battle through to try and make the image work, is the fact that I don't have an ultra wide lens. As wide as I go is 24mm on my full frame camera, so that is not going to get all the way from the water up onto the castle. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to work out, either I do a vertical panoramic, or I stick my camera on portrait and do a horizontal panoramic, and it depends on which is going to work best for the scene. So that's what I'm going to work out first. I'm going to get my camera out and have a little play. So I've had a little bit of a look around, a little bit of a play around, and there's one thing that's really caught my eye for the foreground. but it does have a bit of a risk involved. And I think you might have seen it in the shot that I had before, but if you didn't, I'm going to show you again now. So what I've found is this beautiful little crevice down here that's filling up. Don't get me wrong, it is filling up, and when there's a big wave it really starts to splash. But what I really want is I want this to be my immediate foreground, this little bit here, because what tends to happen, see what I mean, it really fills up. But what's tending to happen is I'm getting this nice line of bubbles and foam leading off towards the castle up on top of the hill. Now with this shot, because the way it is, I'm going to end up with a wide picture at the bottom, a narrow picture in the middle, and then a wide picture at the top. And then putting them together is going to be really, really difficult. But Lightroom and Photoshop these days is so good, it should be able to do it. But this is what I'm thinking. So it's time to get set up. So I've got a bit of a precarious position for my tripod really, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to watch it here, and I'm going to see how high the waves are getting, if they're disturbing my tripod, before I put my camera onto it. Because at the end of the day, I do want this image, but it's not worth losing all my camera gear. Because if I lose all my camera gear, I can't take any more images. So I'm just going to sit here, I'm going to wait for a little bit, see what happens, and then make a decision from there. So I've decided that this is okay and my tripod's not going to move as long as I'm stood behind it, making sure if a big wave does come, it ain't going to disappear. Now for this composition, what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus stack at the same time as creating that vertical panoramic. So obviously my foreground is the first part, so the whole time I'm shooting these, I'm going to be in live view to try and keep my image central. Because if I start to go out to one way, then it's not going to marry up and I'm not going to be able to create this panoramic. So I put it into live view. First of all, I make sure my camera is nice and level. So then my camera is nice and level. The next thing I do is I manually focus on what I want to be sharp. Now, if you've watched any of my videos, you see that I'm manual focusing a lot of them, and I have shown you how to do them many times. So if you're not sure how to do them, watch some of my older videos, and yeah, I'll show you then. So I'm just going to choose the point that I want to be nice and sharp. I'm going to zoom in and then manual focus it and make sure it's pin sharp. So then all I do is I take my initial image, and right now I'm getting these big waves pumping in and pumping out, and they are looking absolutely wicked. What settings I've got it on? I've got on L10, so that's my lowest ISO that I can do in my camera, and then I've got it on F11, and that's giving me a 1.6 second exposure, which is going to give me plenty of movement in that water, beautiful movement in that water. So the next thing I do while on live view is I try and move my camera up, but keeping that center line in the same place. So I've moved my camera up, and then I'm going to choose the next point to focus on, and this time I'm going to focus on the rocks at the bottom. And then I'm just going to move it up one more time. True to form, guess what happened? It started to rain. So I'm going to pack up my camera and I'm going to have a little look around and see what other compositions I can work out while it's drizzling. But I feel like for a day with no light and very little colour, that worked out pretty sweet. Like, I got the texture, I got the drama. I'm going to darken up the sky because it's bleak and it's boring. And I may change the clouds. I probably won't, because I don't really like doing that, because then that's totally fake. But I feel for a day with very little colour, that was a beautiful image. And well, you'll know before I'll know. And here's the image now. What did you think? Was it worth going down there and possibly losing my camera in the swell? Fingers crossed it was. But yeah, I'm going to get packed up. I'm going to see what other compositions I can work out for this bleak, zero light afternoon on the Isle of Skye. But most importantly, making the most of it. So as you might have noticed, I haven't got my camera with me, or my tripod. The reason why is because in situations like this where the water is quite volatile and it's unpredictable, it's always best to leave your expensive stuff where it's safe. But there are a few elements here, and if they're put into the right circumstances, moulded into one composition, is going to be a beautiful image. And I'll talk you through what I've got. So every so often I'm getting these amazing waves forming and washing across, and even every so often what I'm getting these big barrels. Look at the size of that barrel there. And in the foreground is I've got these really interesting but beautiful black rocks, and then off in the distance I've got these little wisps of light coming through the really blue clouds. Now if I can get all of these different elements to work together in harmony, I'm gonna have a beautiful image. And this might mean getting pretty close to some of these waves. So what I am gonna do is leave my camera behind, like I said, and I'm gonna have a little walk around and see what my mind can create. So now I've worked out where the main wave is breaking, I need to find the intricate foreground. That's something special that's going to draw your eye past it, but is interesting enough to capture your eye. Because all of the interest here is not in the cliffs in the background, it's not in the sky, it's in that initial foreground. That's what's going to make or break this image. So I've got my camera here, and I'm just going to use the same technique as I did over there. I'm going to wander around with my camera, finding that composition. So I've got my camera all set up, and what I've decided to go for, on the front, I've got my graduated neutral density filter, freestop, and that's going to darken out the sky, and it's going to be able to give me a proper exposure on the foreground, so nothing is blown out, everything is beautiful. Now this image is not going to be a one-part image. I'm going to capture the foreground, I'm going to capture the wave, and then I'm going to, probably got the sky in there somewhere. The sky isn't changing too much. But the foreground and the wave is going to take two different exposures at two different exposure times. So the first one is going to have to be a little bit of a longer exposure, because what I don't want is it crisp and sharp. I want movement in that water for the first part. And all I'm going to do is take a couple of images and see which one I prefer the most. So I think I've captured my initial image, and sorry about the shakiness, but I think I've captured it now, and I'm liking it. It's looking real sweet. What I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in to make sure it's nice and sharp, and that is looking crisp. That is looking absolutely spot on. So for this image, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a shutter release, because I want to be able to control when that goes off, when I capture that image, when the biggest and the baddest wave rolls by. So I'm going to use one of these. So I've kept my focal point, my focusing point on exactly the same part, the rocks, and that should be enough to capture that wave as well, because it's not happening that much further out. But what I have changed, and quite dramatically, are my settings. Instead of having it on L10, which is my lowest, I've gone up to ISO 400, which hopefully is going to give me enough light to be able to capture that wave in all its glory, and hopefully with a nice green bit underneath. That'd be lovely. So now all I'm going to do is I'm going to get my trigger release, and I'm going to wait until that big wave's rolling on by, and I'm going to shoot. And I'm going to shoot and shoot and shoot, and hopefully capture the right one. So I think I've captured the best wave, I've captured the best surge onto the land, and all the light that ever was in the sky. Tonight there really wasn't a lot. But if nothing else, I hope this has inspired you to go out when the conditions aren't great, because sometimes you can still create some beautiful photography. That was a big wave. But sometimes you can still create that amazing photography. Again, next time you're by the coast and you want to take some pictures, watch that water first before you get close. Don't get close and then it gets you. But that's all from me tonight. And yeah, have a lovely weekend. See you next time.